you may have heard, but Feminist Frequency has a new initiative called the Games and Online Harassment Hotline. This week, the hotline teamed up with 3 other nonprofits who serve the gaming community. Take This, Global Game Jam, and the IGDA Foundation to launch the Stay in the Game Relief Fund. This campaign will help make sure that our organizations can stay in the game during the COVID-19 pandemic, because more people in this community need our help more than ever. You can give back by checking out the campaign at givebutter.com/stayinthegame. You can donate or even start your own fundraising page.
That kiss that they share and the way that Ellie leaves and then says like, I'll see you in a couple, that it couldn't have been more perfect for me. Oh God, this movie, some parts of it were so cute. I couldn't handle it.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media that you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by 2 women who could write big volumes on adolescent longing, Carolyn Pettit.
And how?
And Ebony Adams.
Hey.
Today we're going to be riding our bikes along the highways and byways of small-town Washington State to talk about the modern-day Cyrano tale, The Half of It. Available now on Netflix. How's it going?
It's hot.
What is a Cyrano tale?
So, Cyrano de Bergerac is the classic story of a doofy guy who doesn't know how to express himself, getting somebody who does know how to express himself very well to communicate with the object of his affection for him. But Cyrano himself is not often himself considered attractive because he has a very, very long nose. It was the basis for, maybe a lot of more modern audiences know it from being adapted into the Steve Martin film Roxanne. But you can also definitely see the framework here in The Half of It, the film we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that fancy?
Yeah.
I didn't know that watching it, but now I do. So, hey, I feel like I learned my new thing for the day. Aren't you supposed to try to learn a new thing every day?
Sure.
Whatever.
Be a lifelong learner. Always be ABL, always be learning.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Coffee is for learners.
Oh boy.
So this is how everyone is doing today.
Pretty much.
Cool. Ebony is basically sweating her
just burning off
body off.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I don't know how Carolyn is doing. What's the weather like in the Bay Area, Carolyn?
It's mild at the moment.
Mild. Sounds pretty accurate.
We've had some very hot days these past few days.
Apparently it snowed in Toronto a couple days ago. So that's
apparently like the whole eastward 60% of the United States is going to be facing some massive cold front or something.
Cool.
I don't know.
Listen, the earth is telling us, I'm going to get y'all by hook or by crook.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm tired of your bullshit. So that's it for us.
It really is. And can you blame it?
No.
Not at all. I was very upset about the healthcare system in America recently, which I am regularly, but, I had more specific reason to be recently. And I was like, I'm getting the fuck out of this country, which is not a thing that I ever say. And I was like, well, I can go to Canada because I'm a Canadian citizen.
Womp womp.
And then I was like, where would I go in Canada, though? I was like, I don't really want to go back to Vancouver, maybe Toronto. And then it snowed, and I was like, hell no, I'm not leaving California. I need California to be its own country. How's that separatist movement going? Can we start that up again?
Oh gosh, as if we weren't already on somebody's watch list.
I'm just saying. All right, y'all. Yeah. The Half of It is the second feature film from director Alice Wu, whose last film was 2004's Saving Face. The Half of It is a sweet coming-of-age story about a wry, bookish, financially strapped teenager named Ellie Chu who agrees to help Paul, the charming but dim football player / part-time sausage king, and we mean that literally, who is desperate to woo the girl that Ellie herself has a crush on. What? It's a love story, but perhaps not in the way you think, or as Ellie herself says, it's not the kind of love story where everyone gets what they want. It's a film that centers platonic or the love between friends just as much, if not more, than romantic love, but it never diminishes the longing that Ellie feels for the lovely Aster. Nor does it give the saccharine happy ending that a more traditional film might. So let's talk about the half of it.
Let's talk about it.
All right, y'all.
I don't watch a lot of films. I don't know that I would characterize this as like, YA and the way that you talk about like YA literature or whatever, but I don't watch a lot of films that center teenagers very often, and after watching Booksmart last year and really enjoying it and really enjoying the half of it, I'm thinking, what have I been missing? Because clearly, there are some people who are doing some great work. One of the things that I really liked about this movie, in the same way that I really like this about Booksmart, films about teenagers that kind of allow them to be messy and take them seriously while also acknowledging that so much of what is making them miserable is a product of the fact that they are young, and that they don't have the autonomy and the resources that they will, hopefully have later in life. I found this film like just really delightful. Like it's, it takes on some really heavy issues. I mean, the relationship with Ellie and her dad, for one, but it remained so, like, it was just like a confection. It was so light in a lot of ways. I really liked it.
I was fascinated by this film, certainly. Early on, I think it caught my interest because there's a moment early on where, Ellie Chu, the main character, who is, I think, just wonderful and played wonderfully. She has sort of begrudgingly agreed to help Paul, this the earnest but inarticulate football player, sausage king, try to communicate his love to Aster Flores. And so, and she's watching this film at home with her dad. Her dad is a Chinese immigrant who doesn't speak English very well, but he watches a lot of films at home. And so at one point he's watching the film Wings of Desire, which is a film that I adore. And Ellie winds up just quoting the film directly in the letter that she writes on Paul's behalf for Aster. And the funny thing is that Aster, recognizes it, and she's like, "Oh yeah, nice try. Like I like Wim Wenders too, but it's that thing where I like Wings of Desire." I would never in a million years have caught that was a reference to Wings of Desire if somebody snuck that in an email or a romantic letter to me or whatever. Mm. So you kind of understand very early on that that this is a kind of heightened reality with characters who are way more in some ways knowledge aware, culturally aware, articulate than not only most young people, but most adults actually are. Though of course they're still deeply confused and troubled about all the questions of love and life and things that so many young people are. But you kind of have to just go with it, accept that this is a bit of a fantasy in the sense of how its characters think and talk and act at times. But I have a lot of affection for the film. I think that it's definitely got its heart in the right place. It's really sweet. I love that it doesn't give you the conventional ending, as Ellie says very, very upfront at the beginning, that this is not a love story, or at least not the kind where everyone gets what they want, and she wasn't kidding about that. I did feel like maybe I'm just a little too old for this at times or something, because I felt like some of the situations were a little contrived, and I didn't really believe in the behavior of the characters at times, but as a film for younger people, I think it's really sweet and smart and endearing and great. I'm
just imagining, people who are listening, I'm by no means saying that like there's just a cornucopia of, just a buffet of media that young queer kids can watch these days and see themselves affirmed by. But I am heartened by the increasing, amount of media. And I just think like, God, what would it have been like to watch this when I was like 15, and to just have it be like Ellie's longing for and just like wide-eyed kind of, admiration of Aster, and really kind of the idea of Aster, like to have that taken so seriously, to not to have it not played for a joke, to have a film that took it seriously and took both characters seriously, I'm wondering what that would have been like. And I love that that Ellie is Chinese American. Like, come on, like young queers of color, just getting to see yourself on screen, and like that heavy anticipation of wondering if you're going to get to kiss the object of your affection. Oh, God, pump it right into my veins.
I think that I agree with you on a lot of what you said, Caro, and the parts about like the movie didn't grip me, right? Like it wasn't like I had just completely lost myself to this narrative in this world, but I still enjoyed it, and I still think there's a lot of value to it, and it's still like really, really solid. I did also have that feeling of like I might be a little too old for for this, which is fine. Like, and I don't feel that way about everything that I watch with teenagers, but it did feel a little bit like that for this particular one, and that's not honestly like, and sincerely, I'm not trying to diminish the value of this film, or that it's actually like a very, it's a good film. But one of the things I love, so Ellie Chu is played by Leah Lewis, and I think she plays her so well. Like, I really,
fantastic.
So good. I really, really, really like this character a lot, and I think that she's just she just embodied who this young woman is in. The poor, like she's, they're poor. They're like struggling financially. She lost her mother at a young age. Her father is, like he's around and doing stuff, but he's dealing with the loss of his wife. And she knows that she's smart, right? Like that's the thing that I love about this, is that while she's insecure about maybe her sexuality, she's insecure about kind of being a bit nerdy, feeling like she's stuck in this town that she doesn't really want to be in, but feels obligated to be. She never doubts her intelligence. And I think that that's really beautiful for a teenager, and really like a wonderful representation in this space.
Yeah. And I also love how she doesn't sort of, like blossom into something that she's not. She remains, kind of resolutely Ellie throughout, even as she starts to learn more about how to, perhaps open herself up in some ways, or take chances in some ways. Like her
Ellie glasses don't ever come off, and she's not like goes through some fucking huge makeover, which I was so happy about as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think.
I didn't mean. I thought you had more to say. Sorry, I didn't mean to say what you were saying.
No, that was exactly it. Like, I don't watch a lot of rom-coms. I do read tons of romance, as anyone who listens to the podcast knows. But I don't watch a lot of rom-coms precisely because too often, and maybe it's just the ones that I've seen, there are those tropes and beats that kind of have to be hit, and yeah, there often, are those moments of like sort of forced change for women in ways that hinge upon like the physical, right? So like, oh, we have this character who's kind of billed as being like, plain Jane or whatever, but we know that she's incredibly conventionally attractive anyway, but like she's wearing glasses, and then, 3/4 of the way through the movie, she's got the makeover scene. She takes off the glasses, shakes her ponytail loose, and you're like, what? Come on. So I was glad we didn't have that.
I think this film has a lot of respect for its characters in general. I mean, I think there's a great moment early on where Aster is, I think, responding maybe to one of quote unquote Paul's letters and says, she says something like, she acknowledges that she's pretty, right? And she says, like, that may sound conceited, but, like, let's be honest. And, like, I sort of, like, I always, in real life, I kind of appreciate it when people who are attractive, like, in the conventional, by cultural standards sense, like, acknowledge their attractiveness, acknowledge maybe that there are certain privileges that come along with that. And also, of course, that there can be lots of unwanted attention or lots of like all kinds of, things that maybe aren't great about it either. But like, just like, I don't have much patience for like the beating around the bush of people who just refuse to acknowledge that they are considered attractive when it's incredibly obvious that they are considered attractive. But Aster also in this film isn't just like the pretty girl that Paul and Ellie adore, but who isn't really much more than that. I mean, I don't think the film gives her as much time or development as it does to, Ellie and Paul, but I think what time it does give her is well used to develop her as somebody who is complex in her own way. I mean, I think the film, there's a big religious community in the film, and the film, it doesn't like try to simplify that or just like ridicule that either. It acknowledges, the questions, the doubts, I think that some of those characters have. Like Aster at one point asks Paul, like, do you believe in God? And Paul says, of course. And it's like, maybe it's because he believes it, but he also probably thinks it's what she wants to hear. Mm-hmm. But the way that she responds to that, like, yeah, of course. Like, you can tell that even though, like, her father, I think, is, like, the pastor, that she seems to be having these questions in herself about, like, what does it even really mean to believe in God? And do I believe in God? And I don't know. I just appreciate that there are those shades of complexity to all of these characters, except maybe Trig, who, oh God, do I hate Trig.
I love that they named him Trig, though, right? Like that.
Yeah.
So Trig, just for folks who haven't seen it yet, Trig is the Bumble, like the really like quote unquote hot jock dude that Aster is dating because like she's the hottest like young woman in school and he's the hottest guy in school, and so they just like are supposed to be together kind of thing. Like that's the sense that you get. And
she's such a non-entity to him that he never picks up on the fact that like she's completely checked out of their relationship, and it matters to him not a whit, so like he will be straight up talking to her or talking at her. Mm-hmm. And the point is she is just a warm hot body in front of him. But the fact that she's clearly not invested in their relationship doesn't penetrate whatsoever.
I also really appreciated Alice Wu's direction of this film. There's some really smart and effective, I think, visual moments. Like there's a moment where, so Ellie is, as Aster sometimes calls her, a heathen. She's not she's not religious, but she is the accompanist at the church because she's a better musician than anyone that her father could find, and like he couldn't handle the poor musicianship of the believers. So the heathen gets to sit in and play. So, but there's this moment where I forget exactly how the dynamic plays out, but I think Ellie texts something to Aster as Paul, right? And Aster reacts to it, but then she turns backwards and smiles at Paul, and Paul like nods and like smiles back at her. And you have this shot, right, where you can see Paul and Astra and the whole congregation like together on the bottom level, and Ellie is like alone up in the, I forget what you call that area, but the musicians like where the organ is on this higher level, and it's just like it's this really like meaningful shot about like how she is kind of removed. I mean, even though she's very involved in the dynamic of their relationship because she's writing everything that Paul says, like she is like removed from it. Like there's a real, I just love shots like that communicate something beyond just like, here's the physical space that the characters are in, which there's definitely something of that going on in that moment.
That whole scene felt very theatrical in a Shakespearean sort of way, more so than I think some of the other parts of this film, where it was like she's making this grand proclamation at the top of whatever, and then she like walks down the stairs, and then everyone is in their different areas, and like it was what's the word that I'm looking for? Anyways, it was
theatrical?
Just cute. Thanks, Ebony. It was queued up in a certain way. I can't think of the word, but where like
it's kind of maybe contrived, like
we don't need to guess the word I mean, but it's fine. But
let's spend another minute doing it.
I'm just gonna ramble for a while till it comes to me. But no, I mean, like there was something about like, and it's climactic in that way, right? Like this is obviously the moment we've been waiting for, and it does play out a little bit differently than some of the other. Carolyn, you were talking about the direction. Like it plays out a little bit differently physically in that space, in the way that it was performed with this whole audience, and like nobody really moves except for Ellie. And like when she starts walking down the stairs, I'm like, oh, is she running out? Like what's happening? And then it's just. I don't know. I thought it was interesting the way that it was all staged. Staging. There you go.
Speaking
well, hold on. But I think it's also related to like the intellectual references of the whole film, right? Like that the relationship between Astor and Ellie, like Carolyn, you were saying, is a little hard to accept. But I think that it's actually really. I love that it is giving teenagers credit in a lot of ways of like young people can be really smart and intellectual and put these pieces together and use texts, whether it be films or actual books or what have you, to try to make sense of their own lives, right? And their parents' lives and the choices that they need to be making and thinking about.
Yeah. And of course, even Paul, who, we could write off as the quote unquote like dumb guy, I think by the end of the movie understand that he may not be the best verbal communicator on the planet, but there are all kinds of intelligence, and he does have
Paul's love language is sausage tacos. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like he's creative in his thinking about food and right what he wants for the business, and like so he's got stuff going on as well.
Yeah, and like when Ellie says to him, "You try harder than anyone." I've ever known, except for my father with my mother. I really loved that, because it reminded me of the scene where Paul is telling Ellie, she gave me this book. It's, The Remains of the Day. And he's like, I've been trying to read it. I've fallen asleep several times, but I'm still trying, It would have been so easy for him to just toss it or get like the Spark Notes version or whatever. But because it matters to Astor, it matters to him,
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, I loved that more than the scene where Ellie is, riding her bike. And oh my God, every time she was on that bike with the basket on the back was so cute. But she's, riding her bike on the highway in this truck that we've seen a couple times before in the film with these teenage dudes, comes riding by, harassing her. And we see, Paul is with her once and then he takes off after the guy's yelling at them. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Save the puppy, whatever. But it meant more to me that he kept trying to read The Remains of the Day as a way of demonstrating character.
I think it's interesting the particular way that this film lets its characters make mistakes and how it views those mistakes. So particularly there's a scene where Paul kisses Ellie And and you know, when I see that, I'm like, oh my God, dude, what are you doing? Like, why would you think that she would want that? And like, there are definitely films in which I think even just seeing that, depending on how it was handled, it could have been like, you know, because like the forced kiss or whatever is often like this really, it's a problematic kind of trope, right? Or it can be if at least the pattern of like, the guy sort of sweeping the girl off her feet with the forced kiss that she doesn't even know is coming, nor for all he knows does she want. But like I thought that, I mean, I don't know, I just thought the way this film, like, you know, young people do misunderstand things sometimes and do fuck up, and like, so it's not like we're supposed to like write off Paul forever for like, how could you ever do something like that was just awful, you're quote unquote canceled, you know, get out of here. It's like we can acknowledge that it was a fuck up, and I think the way the film actually treated it as a fuck up was kind of like refreshing in a way.
Me too, because I think like we don't see nearly enough instances of men and women being friends without there having to be that romantic undercurrent, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a way in which we're all trained to see any kind of closeness or intimacy between men and women as necessarily like pre-sexual, you know, or romantic in some way. And so the fact that like, yeah, he's 17, you know, and it's unsurprising that he might have, you know, misread those cues, because many of us do make that same error. I also like how, well, I don't like, but when he figures out that Ellie likes Aster and says it's a sin, it's this total, you can tell he doesn't really believe it, you know? This goes back to the question that you posed, Caro, when Aster asked him if he believes in God. And he says, like, yeah, of course. And you're like, well, do you really? Or is that just something you've internalized, something you've consumed, and now you're, you know, repeating it, you're regurgitating it.
Yeah.
But you don't get any sense that, like, he actually feels this, and this is something he's going to have to unlearn. He's lashing out. He's angry in that moment. He's confused. But that doesn't seem like, I don't know, anything he truly believes.
As he's trying to struggle through, like, but I like this person and think they're a good person, why do I think they're going to hell, is like looking up things about being gay online. His mom finds it.
I love that he types into Google, how do you know if you're a gay?
Yes.
So
like, which is like, you don't call a gay person a gay, you know, but like, he doesn't know. Like, he honestly just doesn't know, right?
Totally. It's very, it is very character consistent.
Yeah.
And so, but like, I did really like that his mom, who obviously is, you know, the family is very traditional in a lot of ways and very conservative, it seems like, was like, it's okay if you're gay. Like, she doesn't really believe it, but she's like, you're my kid and I'm going to be there for you. And so, yeah, it kind of sucks that she's relieved that he's not. But I did like that she made that effort, even though it probably like killed her to do that, right? Like, that modeling I thought was nice. Back to the relationship between Ellie and Paul is like, of course, like, you know, you see their platonic relationship growing and them like caring for each other and like being invested in this, but both in selfish ways, but like that, you know, as you spend time with each other, you learn more about them and that there's slightly more depth to other humans, right? And it makes total sense that like he would start to have feelings for Ellie because he's like learning about this other way of existing, right? Like, if you're 17 and you think someone is cool, you're going to automatically think that that's sexual, right? Like, it's just, I mean, fuck, you still do that as adults, so whatever. But I think that one thing that's kind of cool here is that he's learning that, like, in what is attractive might not just be the hottest young woman in school, right? That like intelligence is attractive, and connection and communication and like engagement and like, you know, all of these different things can also be attractive. And like, that was his process, that his emotional growth that took place. Because when Ellie asked him at the beginning of the movie, like, why are you so into Aster? Like, how do you know you're in love with her? He's like, he was trying just not to be like, she's super hot, you know?
Yeah.
And so like, it makes sense that he would then be like, oh, I must like Ellie now because he's fucking 17 and doesn't, and hormones, you know, like, and doesn't know that you could just be like, oh, you're a smart person and we have a really nice friendship or whatever. And maybe he's attracted to her and like, that's legit too, you know, like that's super legit. And I'm thankful that it is about a queer young woman so that it doesn't end up that those two are together in the end kind of thing, you know?
I was low-key worried, even though I knew going in that that's not what was going to happen. I was so prepped for it by, you know, all of the media that I've seen before that I was like, oh no, they're not going to end up together, are they? Like, this is not what we're going to get.
This is not going to be a chasing Amy.
Exactly. But then, you know, when Ellie and Aster do not ride off into the sunset together, I was equally pleased because I know how much, you know, Ellie, you know, feels for Aster and just, like I said, longs for her. But I just thought it was so honest, the way, again, that it portrays this young love that is so intense and can be so all-consuming, but is not meant to be, nor will it be, this kind of forever love, you know, and that's okay. You know, I'm thinking about, you know, like the people I was in love with when I was 17 and was convinced, like, you know, yep, this is it. This is what a soulmate is. And maybe I remember some of their names now. Maybe I don't. Read my Twitter feed. But the point is, like, you know, it was right for that moment. Like that kiss that they share and the way that Ellie leaves and then says, like, you know, I'll see you in a couple. That it couldn't have been more perfect for me. Oh God.
Well, and
this movie's, some parts of it were so cute I couldn't handle it.
Well, and also the other thing is that there's no indication that Aster is queer, right? And that Aster might have any interest in women. Although I bet you she started to feel very confused about what was happening because she ascribed sexual attraction to the communication. Right. And so as you
didn't feel like that Aster felt any kind of
I do.
pull?
I do. Okay. Totally. Mm-hmm. But we don't know that, right? Like Aster, it seems like Aster, it feels like a very questioning moment for Aster, being like, I didn't realize that I could have these kinds of feelings for, you know, or this closeness or this intimacy, and like trying to figure out whether that could be romantic or sexual or not. And I'm glad, again, also that they didn't end up together and that it was like, you know, like, Aster just magically is like, cool, I'm in love with women now, which, you know, fuck it, can happen, right? And then maybe she decides she's not, and like, whatever, that's also fine. Yeah. But I like that they didn't do that, and it just left it with Aster being like, I'm not gonna be with this fucking douchebag. was her big revelation of like, I'm gonna follow my art dreams, right? The other thing, I guess, like, well, sorry, just really quick, too. The other thing about that ending is that as Ellie is like, see you in a couple years, I was like, that is so the thing you would say as a teenager. Yes. And you're never going to see her again.
I know.
Like, you're going to go to college. You're going to date all of these fucking women that actually, like, are into you. And you're going to be able to explore that in a way that is less repressed than it is in your small town, you know? And you're not going to fucking give a shit about Aster in, like, a year.
Oh, no, I totally see them, like, writing to each other in college. Totally. And they become good friends, but no, they're not going to be a couple. But I did, okay, and clearly I'm projecting here because earlier in the film, in that just really lovely interlude when they're in the hot spring, and, you know, Aster, you know, heads into the water and, you know, coaxes Ellie in. I was prepared for Aster in that moment to reveal that, like, oh, maybe not, she's not into Ellie, but, you know, she's had feelings like this for friends before. Something like, I just thought, like, this is, there's a little baby bisexual here. Okay, so clearly I'm, you know, projecting. Because I just thought, it was clear to me throughout. I just felt like throughout, like, oh yeah, Aster's definitely bi.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Aster is me, and I think maybe that's, and again, I don't think the film gives her as much time and development as it does Ellie and Paul, but I think there's enough there that we can certainly infer or speculate that, like, maybe that's where her even asking Paul, like, do you believe in God? Like, maybe she is on some level struggling with, like, the limits of what the church tells her is acceptable or unacceptable in terms of what she wants for herself. And so, yeah, at the very least, I think we can suspect that she's going to go to college and at least be open to exploring things that. Oh,
she's going to art school. She for real is going to wind up exploring something.
She is definitely hooking up with some women, whether she is queer at all or not. That is definitely happening.
Yeah, like of all the characters, and my favorite characters in the film are definitely Ellie's dad, who is just so sweet, and then the English teacher who straight up did not give a shit that like, Ellie was writing papers for people. In fact, she was like, I would prefer that you did that than I have to write, read the shitty papers they would write themselves. But I really wish we had been able to spend more time learning about like Aster's interior life, but also the way she has to move through the world. Because although we definitely learn more about like Ellie and her father and the particularity of them being, Chinese and Chinese American in this small town in Washington, we don't get a lot about Aster and the fact that like Aster and her family, this Latina family, are in this very white town, and that like there's that scene where Aster's in the high school in front of like the mean girls, like all the blonde girls or whatever, and it's like the visual contrast between her with her beautiful brown hair and then this row of blonde women behind her, and the fact that she's dating this dude Trig, who I can only assume does not have a last name like Flores, but is something super white. Like I would have liked more time spent on that.
Oh, and Trig thinking that Ellie has a crush on him.
Oh God,
yeah.
I mean, it felt a little wedged in, but I also like it. It was.
It did make me laugh. He was like, "Wait, I know what's going on here."
I mean, I have no sympathy for anyone who does the who puts their partner in the position of the public proposal.
Oh God.
Where there's like all of at least it's okay if it's only for show and you've already discussed like, I'm going to ask you to marry me at some point, and like, are you okay with like then we can do the ball game, like I'll ask you on the Jumbotron thing. But to put a person in that position like without that, no, like hell no, that is just absolutely unacceptable. But
exactly.
But the God, yeah, Ellie's dad. Like I really loved that we get the way Ellie talks about her father and like how qualified he is, how smart he is, and how like the only reason that he doesn't have a better job or whatever is it's because he doesn't speak English all that well, like people perceive him as not being capable or qualified or whatever, but he's like eminently qualified, and like I don't know, I just love that acknowledgement of how often it happens that people are looked over for things that they absolutely can do, are capable of doing, should be doing, jobs they should be doing or whatever, but because of societal prejudices, racism, gender discrimination, what you name it, like they can't get those jobs.
And there's that great moment where Ellie is saying to Paul like he doesn't talk good, and Paul's like, I don't either, but we know that he knows in that moment like I'm never gonna have the same trouble, that your father would. Although there are kind of the class implications, because I think, Trig is obviously of the, upper middle class and the elite in this town, but Paul, much more clearly working class, got this like huge family and whatever. And so there are those considerations as well too. Like there's a way in which, the way that you speak marks you in so many ways, and either, allows for inclusion or, puts up a barrier to exclusion for so many people.
I think that part of what is so appealing about this and this film as like a rom-com, right? As like a, type of story that we've seen so much of in the past is that like we are increasingly seeing stories of folks in these traditional roles who are immigrants, who are poor, who are, like all these different intersections of identity that adds a depth to these stories that we just didn't get before, right? It like these stories were historically about wealthy, rich white people, or like money didn't matter in these situations. And I think that all of these little pieces make this film so much deeper than films before it, or, if that makes sense, of this genre. And I really appreciate that. I think it obviously comes from the creators and the perspectives and the experience of the creators. And it also, I just lost what other the also is. So yeah, I just appreciate those touches. I think it adds a lot. And like Ebony, you started out talking about, like, what does this mean for young queer women of color or like girls of color growing up and like seeing these experiences and having them validated, not having to squeeze their own experience into white women or, you know, like a wealthy person or what have you,
right.
To be able to feel seen and validated.
And have a great dad who'll send you off to college in Iowa with 6 days worth of dumplings. Yo, that's love right there.
I mean, I don't know why going to college in Iowa is the dream, but, you know, you go get it.
Hey, Grinnell, you know.
Is that
cool.
a real school?
I did look. Huh?
Is that a real school?
It is, and it's a great school. I did love, though, talking, Carol, you mentioned at the top of the show about how, like, you know, there were things that were, you know, kind of contrived that indicate, like, this is a heightened reality. It seemed as if she decided to go to Grinnell, and then, she was automatically admitted? I didn't understand, like, what the time elapsing there was. It seemed like there were some decisions that got made really quickly, and then things just sort of happened. But it didn't matter to me. It was just a delightful little confection, and I loved it.
All right, y'all. Well, the Half of Us is on Netflix, so go get it. We'll be right back with our weekly freakouts. The COVID-19 pandemic has the gaming industry and community playing the world on challenge mode right now. So many gamers, developers, and studios are affected. At the same time, people are turning to games as a source of relief, escape, and connection. Every day is a reminder that the people who make and play games matter. Nonprofits that make this industry the best it can be too are being hit hard by the pandemic as well. This is why our Games and Online Harassment Hotline has partnered with Take This, Global Game Jam, and the IGDA Foundation, 3 other nonprofits, to launch the Stay in the Game Relief Fund. Collectively, our organizations decrease stigma and support the mental health of game lovers and creators. We work to create supportive environments for an entry into this creative industry and pave the way for a gaming industry and community that is as safe and inclusive as it is innovative. We need your help right now because more people in gaming need our help now more than ever. You can make a difference for those in your community who have been deeply affected by the pandemic by going to givebutter.com/stayinthegame and making a donation and sharing it with your friends. What's your freak out? Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Carolyn, you want to get us started?
Yeah, I am freaking out about a film called Driveways, which is a film, you know, like a number of films that were slotted for theatrical releases right around now. It's obviously that whole experience of human life, going to the movies, is not happening right now. So Driveways is now available to watch, like, on demand online, and this is a really lovely, film. It stars Hong Chau, who you will recognize. Many will recognize from having played the trillionaire character in Watchmen on HBO, like the woman who's building the mega tower or whatever, who has more money than God. But in this film, she plays a working class single mom whose estranged older sister has recently passed away. And so she and her young son go to basically to clean up the house, and maybe sell it, just to figure out kind of what to do with the house where her sister who died had lived. And the next door neighbor at that house is this like Korean War veteran played by Brian Dennehy, who was this sort of legendary actor of stage and screen who did recently pass away. But in this film he plays this like Korean War vet, this obviously much older guy, and an unlikely kind of connection develops between these two
Stay in the Game relief fund.
groups of people,
This campaign will
and
help make sure that our
it's a
organizations
very
can stay
it's a
in the
very
game
gentle
during the
film, but
COVID-19 pandemic.
it really
Because more
it
people
observes
in
its
the
characters
community
with a
need
lot
our
of
help more than
compassion and
ever.
empathy.
can give
It's a
back
very
by
gentle
checking
film,
out
and I
the
just think that
campaign at
particularly right now, at a time where maybe a lot of us are not
givebutter.com/stay-in-the-game.
getting as much
You can donate or even start
human
your own
interaction
fundraising
as we
page.
usually do or might want or need. For me, a film like this that is so human and so so compassionate and so concerned with people and their lives and their small and large struggles. It's just a lovely film to watch right now.
Awesome. That sounds great.
That sounds good.
I miss movie theaters.
Oh God, me too.
Me too.
Especially when it got really hot. The last few days, I was like, oh, like an air-conditioned movie theater. That's what you do on these like hot summer days, you know?
Yes.
But also, I just miss that experience. I don't know, whatever. It is the least of the problems right now, but it's just something that I think you two also understand and agree with.
Absolutely.
All right, Ebony, what are you freaking out about?
I'm freaking out about, excuse me. Well, it's kind of a nest of things. So, and I want to frame it by saying that I think it's, apt that we're having this conversation during what is Asian American Pacific Islander Month. But there's a recent article going around from The Guardian that relates the story about these young Tongan boys who were marooned on a deserted island for over a year before they were rescued. And they were rescued by this wealthy white young man who was the son of a incredibly wealthy family. And so it has been discussed as kind of this article and this story about these Tongan boys as this refutation to the whole like Lord of the Flies phenomenon. This assumption that left to, our own devices, humanity is, will be savage and selfish and dark. And will revert to, kind of might makes right. It's this very hopeless and, cynical view of human nature. And so this story about these, Tongan boys who survived and, who didn't turn on each other is being offered as this corrective. The problem is that it is a very white framing of what happened to these kids that should be surprising to no one, but this story has really taken off, and there have been all these calls for the dude who wrote the article, like, oh, you need to turn this into a screenplay. We want to see this on the big screen. We want to read more about this, with no expectation that actual Tongan people will be involved or that the way they tell this story should be the narrative that we should be learning. So today I happened to stumble upon this Twitter thread, this writer, Vika Mana, who is herself Tongan, just talking about, and I'll read one of her tweets. She says, the way people are talking about the Tongan boys on the timeline is reaching a level of disturbing where people are talking about us without realizing we can also lead this conversation. And it's just this incredibly, informative and, important, insertion into a place that she should not have to insert herself. Tongan people should own the story. Mm-hmm. And I mean, literally own the story. Like, there is a white man who bought the life rights to this story, and that's appalling. And that's, but as I say, it's not surprising. So I'm going to put the link to it. And you can read both, if you want to, the Guardian article that is sparking this conversation, and then Vika Mana's responses to it, as well as a number of other Tongan writers who are like, yo, there's so much the story leaves out. There's so much that it gets wrong. But also, it is itself a horribly racist, colonialist framing. Like, oh, we're so surprised, that these Tongan boys, these indigenous kids, didn't behave themselves the way that we expected based upon this, mid 20th century, work of fiction. Like, fuck off with that. So anyway, gonna put the link up there.
Okay. That's a lot.
It's really super interesting.
Jeez. All right. My freak out this week, I'm going to shout out 2 books, which are both the third in their series, their respective series. But I just finished them back to back. So the first is Mary Robinette Kowal, friend of the cast. I finished The Relentless Moon, which is available for pre-order, I believe. It is the third book in the Lady Astronaut series, which I didn't know there was going to be a third book because the second book ended in a way that I was like, I don't know where the fuck you would go from here. Like, this is the end. But the third book actually takes place in between the first 2. And it is from the perspective of a totally different character. So it's someone that you meet in the other books, but, you obviously very different. And she is also an astronaut, and this is all about time on the moon instead of time going to Mars. I highly recommend it. I think it was really delightful. I think that this character is a lovely, badass woman that I enjoyed reading and experiencing. And also, I'm going to say that there is parts of the book that startled the crap out of me in terms of our current times. And that are like in this book. So that's it. I'm just going to say it's not out yet. I'm sorry, I don't know when it comes out, but I do know that it's up for pre-order. So definitely check that out if you're into space and astronauts and all of that jazz. I don't think that you need to know the other 2 books to pick this one up, although I do recommend the other books as well. But it is, fairly standalone, although it does reference some of the other characters. I will also say, one more thing about it is what I love about these books is that I think Mary Robinette does a really good job of figuring out how to integrate issues of race into a story which could very easily just be all white people, right? Mm-hmm. It is, it's about space exploration as a way to save humanity in like after World War II. So I think it takes place like in the 50s and 60s. The 50s, 40s, 50s, whatever. It's, it's a time, whatever. It's a time, I was like, when is World War II? Anyways, it's a time when, like, I think with some other authors that are not as conscious of the importance of addressing these issues does. So, for example, like, one creative way of, like, directly addressing race in this is that there is the ICA, which is the interplanetary, no, I'm making all of this up. Anyways, the people who fund space travel or space exploration across the world, one of the big countries that invests in space travel is South Africa. South Africa is in the middle of apartheid at this moment in time. And so like using that as a way to talk about race and racism and tensions, like on Mars and like in Mars or on the moon or in these discussions, I think was a really smart way of not erasing the realities that that face people of color in this particular time and integrating them into these narratives. So and also there are lots, it's about women in space and so lots of sexism too. Hooray. Anyways, Mary Robinette does a really good job. I'm not doing it justice, but I think it's really smart how she handles all of that. The second book I want to shout out that I just finished last night is John Scalzi's The Last Emperox. Wow, I've never said that out loud. There's a lot of names in this book that if I ever had to say out loud, I think I would just be like, you know how when you read, you just like make up the ways that names should be pronounced because you're just like reading them in your head. Does anyone else do that?
Oh, yeah. And I think the bonus should be you just picking out those names and trying to figure out how to pronounce them. Sure.
And then as soon as you say them out loud or talk to someone else, you're like, oh, shit, I totally read that wrong. Anyways, okay. John Scalzi's The Last Emperox. It's from the Interdependency series. This is a trilogy. This is the last book, so it ends. The first 2 books are Collapsing Empire, The Consuming Fire. And it is a space opera. It's about it's about climate change, but in a, obviously in a science fiction world. So it's about the end of the flow, which is the ways that habitats can get to other solar systems within this larger interdependency. So once they are cut off from each other, then they will not have any ability to sustain their own lives because they're interdependent. And you have all of these monopolies on like rice and technologies, and each of these noble families have all of these monopolies. So therefore, if they get cut off, it is literally going to be a long, slow death for all of these planets and communities and hubs and all of this stuff. So it's a really, it's bold and it's intense, and there's a lot of evil people and, you know, hierarchies and, you know, all of the like political machinations that go on there, and some just really, really cool female characters that I really enjoyed. So I think it was a lovely wrapping up of the series, and I recommend it. So I didn't mean to have 2 freakouts, but
they both sound great though.
They're wonderful. All right, we do have a listener freakout this week, which I am excited about. We love your freakouts. So this one is from Juno.
How's it going, folks? Juno here. Today I'm freaking out about a queer live read of the 2001 Ocean's 11, aptly named Ocean's 11 But Gay. It was produced by Gabby Dunn and has a fantastic cast, among whom are Stephanie Beatrice from Brooklyn Nine-Nine in the lead role, Jen Richards, Mara Wilson, Natasha Negavanos and Elise Bauman. The entirety of the script was performed live on YouTube the other day, and it's been uploaded to Gabby Dunn's channel for posterity if anyone wants to check it out. Of course, it was all done through Zoom, which added to how entertaining it was. There were rapid costume changes, dollar store wigs, set design courtesy of Zoom's virtual background feature, and Jen Richards nailing the whole Brad Pitt eating in almost every scene game. As a queer person who loves heist movies, I'm endlessly disappointed by films both oversaturated with men and overwhelmingly heteronormative. This live read was incredibly refreshing in comparison. I cannot recommend it enough. It's fun, it's queer, shenanigans ensue. What more do you need? Anyway, I hope everyone is safe and has a good week. See ya.
Thanks, Juno. That I don't know about anyone else, but Ocean's 11 but queer is is like kind of the best description of anything ever. So we're going to put the link to that in the show notes so folks can check it out. We would love you to submit your own freakout at feministfrequency.com/freakout, FREQOUT. Thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Stay tuned for the Freakin' After Party, which is only available to backers of this podcast, and you can learn more about that at patreon.com/femfreak. I am going to have a freak out in the after party about how people in San Francisco are fucking monsters. Please tune in to find out why. You can find us everywhere great podcasts are found, and if you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review us. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all the social medias at FemFreak. The show is engineered by Rob Para. Carrie Stimson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Join us next week for another feminist dive into popular culture. Bye.
Bye.
Later.